Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you again, Whitney.
Good to see you too.
Whitney and I were on a panel probably just like this one that you just finished last year at this time, so it's nice to be back. So we're going to start today talking a little bit about maintaining good culture in your operation, and Whitney, as you heard, is an extra space. So in our current political climate, not to get too political here, but
let's go there. Let's go there right away.
Things are a little tense, just from the top down. How do you kind of prevent that from seeping into your operations, and how do you stay focused on making sure everybody can be heard and seen, but also that they stay focused on the mission and it's not divisive in your business?
Yeah, easy, right? Super easy. Super easy to do it. I agree. Things are fraught. We were talking about every time you wake up and you open the news, there's a lot of distractions out there. There's a lot that's happening. And I think we kind of have two main strategies that I would talk about. The first one being a listening strategy. This is an always-on strategy where it's both formal and informal, but you always want to be kind of checking in with your team members. Some of the more formal ways that we do that can be through surveys. We actually just finished a survey yesterday, kind of a pulse check on our engagement. And that gives us good data to be able to look to say, okay, where are the outliers? What are the broad trends that we're looking at? Also, I think we had regional meetings the last couple weeks. And so we had 9 regional meetings over a 3-week time period. And that gives us a chance to really connect with smaller teams so we can answer their questions, we can understand what's on their mind, what concerns that they have in that smaller setting where you have execs meeting with kind of mid-level management leaders who are really on the ground working with our frontline team members. And then there's some of the informal things. I don't know about your offices, but we're an in-person first culture, and we have an internal stairwell that runs between the 4 different floors that we have. And I swear that is our most popular place for check-in meetings, where you see people casually connecting with each other because it's like they're just running into each other from a different department. And so there's the chance to kind of those informal, you can have more intentional ones with skip levels. I think it's really just connecting and making sure that you are asking the questions of what's on your mind, what can we help answer, what are you stressed about? So listening strategy is the first one. Second strategy in this case, I would say, is really employee experience. So this is where we look to see at every kind of point in the life cycle with our team members. And I know we got some team members in the audience who are very involved in these different phases, but the last panel was talking about talent acquisition. We don't even think about it from the first time a candidate's experience with us. And it's a tough labor market out there. Having some empathy and understanding what is really stressing those candidates. How can we make that experience smoother for them? So part of that is, I think probably in the last panel they talked about some of the technology, but Paradox, we use a tool that helps us so that people can quickly get, they can identify the knockout questions, be like, is this the right job for me or not a fit? If it is the right job, they can quickly then schedule an interview and say, okay, great, we've got an interview scheduled. I know the next steps in the process. So there's kind of that candidate experience to make sure that's a smooth process. And then onboarding in their first 2 weeks to their first 90 days. What's that process looking like, and how are we ensuring that they're understanding what their job is, it's clear to them, it's that they're understanding the values of the company. We don't always get it right either.
I thought you did. I thought that's why you're here.
No, it's not perfection. So the third one I talk about is milestones. So when you have team members that hit a significant milestone, you want to make sure that you are also adequately or appropriately showing up and recognizing and reinforcing and creating kind of that calmness. And we have service awards, like most companies, where it's like when you hit 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and we gave gifts out and then a very small bonus. And these gifts were not landing well. I was like, we would probably do a better job of giving them nothing because the gifts were actually offensive. Like we were offending our team members. For example, when you hit your 10 years, you would get a really nice winter jacket. Well, that's great if you live in Utah, not so great if you live in Florida.
Right.
And so we had to kind of listen, to hear what our team members were saying of, this is not hitting the mark, making those adjustments. We got rid of all the gifts. Mine's the first year, switched over to bonuses because we're like, everyone loves cash, right? That's an easy one.
And did you pick that up in the stairwell conversations, or how did you?
Oh, yeah. I had multiple stairwell conversations on this one.
It's the new water cooler conversation.
Totally. And then also, since we're a dispersed workforce as well, we realized there was a very active comment section on our SharePoint page that described the service awards. They're like, you should really take a look at that. And I was like, oh, yes, that is very helpful to see how much our team members are displeased with that element of what we're offering and how we're not hitting the mark, and it's not in alignment really with our culture.
But something you might not have picked up on if it weren't for that feedback loop that you were able to get tap into.
Exactly.
When you talk about the surveys, do you guys do those in-house, or do you outsource that? Is that like a Qualtrics thing off the shelf? Qualtrics?
It is,
yeah,
yes.
Gotcha.
We use Qualtrics as our part. I know, I feel like this should be sponsored. I'm going to drop so many names during our conversation.
Maybe you'll get a jacket, I don't know.
Yeah, so we use Qualtrics, just, with the size that we are as we've grown, and really the ability to have that data analytics quickly to kind of understand exactly where there's trends or where there's outliers. Yeah.
A big topic that we talked about last year was creating a diverse workspace. And now in a lot of places, DEI has sort of become a 4-letter word. How are you adapting to this new paradigm in dealing with issues of diversity and at the same time making everybody feel, again, part of the team and feel included?
Yeah, it's been multiple conversations, but what I'd say I'm really proud of is that we have a CEO who's very committed to diversity and inclusion, equity, and I first joined the company a little over 4 years ago, and I think the first 3 meetings I had with our CEO was really on the topic of DEI. And it was shortly after George Floyd, and we saw a lot of companies that were making kind of some big swings and really kind of making some big adjustments. And I really appreciated his leadership on this topic, and that we've never kind of swung in either direction very far. We've really been steady, and it's always been tied to, does this feel authentic? The activities that we have around DEI, does this feel authentic to who we are at Extra Space? Is this in line with our values? And as long as the answer is yes to those 2 things, great, we've moved forward. We've said no to things because we said, that doesn't feel authentic to who we are at Extra Space. So with the, outside world of things, to your last question, the fraughtness of everything that's going on, we found that we're not making any changes really to the activities. Language-wise, we are adjusting. Because as you mentioned, DEI has become a bit of a lightning rod term. And so to kind of make sure that the activities that we're doing are really focused on, we want to be the best company possible. To do that, we need to cast the widest net to attract top talent. And that's really our goal. So as long as we're focused on those activities, we kind of don't want to get distracted with the political storm that's happening, like you mentioned. Yeah,
and did you say you've changed the language, the verbiage you use?
We have, yeah. We've shifted away from DEI and more towards inclusion and values. And because that feels like that is more authentic to kind of who we are at Extra Space. Like I said, activities haven't changed, just the sound of the activities, the language around it has shifted a little bit.
Right. So another emerging trend that we're probably all dealing with is artificial intelligence. How do we use it? How do we avoid using it in some places? Can you talk about places that Extra Space has been able to use these new developing technologies in ways that have been effective?
Yeah. Probably think about that kind of at 3 different levels, like the organization, and then the people department specifically, and then I'm happy to use myself as how I use it as well. At the organizational level, we've gotten creative with chatbots and sort of see, are there chatbots that we can utilize in some of the sales process, like with our call center? We do chatbots, like I mentioned, in terms of talent acquisition. We've looked at building our own chatbots. Could we use a chatbot that would help people ask questions about kind of the HR manual or questions about policies? We're a Microsoft shop, so we're using Copilot and starting to kind of roll that out slowly to see how that can influence things. And also, I don't know how many SharePoint users we have here. Any SharePoint? Yes. Is your data beautiful and all updated and clean in SharePoint? If so, I want to talk to you afterwards because it seems like no one has clean data. So that's another thing we've been working on to say, how can we use AI to help us understand where we might have inaccurate, outdated information? Then at the people team, so looking at specifically HR people department, I mentioned we use Paradox. That's a tool we've used for talent acquisition. We used large language models. So last year we did our engagement survey and we get great response rate. We have over 90% of employees respond, which also generates a ton of comments. We have 8,000 employees. And in previous years, I had one of my team members sit and read through every comment and tag it with different trends and also sentiment. And it took about 2 weeks for this team member to kind of sit through and read through all of it. And last year, we got the engagement survey data and we were like, okay, we've got all the quantitative side of things. We're ready to send this to the senior leaders. Well, should we just wait 2 weeks on kind of the open-ended feedback? And so we said, let's run it through AI and see what sort of trends it comes back with. So popped it through AI. I asked my teammate who did it, I was like, how long did it take? He was like, 30 seconds. I was like, wow, 2 weeks to 30 seconds. And gave us, 5 top trends that were like, okay, based on what we've seen, we think this is roughly right. Let's share this with the senior leadership, but let's make sure we indicate to say this was AI generated. This has not been reviewed by a human, but it was just a more efficient and gave them what they needed at the time that they needed that information. Yeah. We're launching a new LMS this year, Exonify. And that's another tool that is helping us to use AI to be able to generate better learning and development experiences for our team members. And then I would say also individually, I have ChatGPT open every day. I am constantly using it. I also use a tool called Galileo, which is through Josh Bersin, and it's a closed system. So it's a tool that uses all of Bersin's research. And so that's another tool that I kind of have open on a daily basis to help me as I'm kind of evaluating different challenges.
Yeah. Are there any warnings you'd give the audience about AI's not worked out, or where you've tried it and like, maybe let's do something different?
Yeah, so really close with cybersecurity and IT. So HR has lots of sensitive information. So before I started using these tools, I ran it by them and I said, can you check out this Galileo tool? And they're like, are you planning on uploading sensitive comp data or information? And I was like, no. And being very clear about use cases where you're like, anytime there's sensitive information, that's a big red flag. So we want to avoid that. I think also in general, I read a book called Co-Intelligence, and I really kind of stuck to 2 things specifically from that book. One is that never let AI be the driver. It's in the passenger seat. So don't let AI make decisions, business decisions. So AI doesn't decide who we're going to hire, for example. That's a human that's going to make sure that we're the one making that decision. And so always have to have your hands on the wheel, but invite AI to the table to see, can it help us work smarter? Can it make this process more efficient? The other one is trust but verify, and recognizing that AI tools sometimes can hallucinate or can make up stuff. And so checking what is coming across with other, I sometimes use ChatGPT against Galileo, or I'll use ChatGPT against ChatGPT and see kind of where is the information coming in and what might be slightly different between the two. Yeah.
Have you been able to use AI in any ways when you're doing leadership and development training, things like that? How have you utilized it in that world?
Yeah, so one quick anecdote. I had a mentee reach out to me last week, and she asked, she goes, do you have any content on speaking truth to power? Like, is something we had worked on together? And I was like, ooh, this is a fun one. And so I put in one prompt, and I sent a text to my exec coach that I worked with and said, hey, do you have any resources on this? Put it into Galileo and put it into ChatGPT. And I was like, I'm just curious, which one is gonna be able to quickly get me the resource that this team member wants to work on? ChatGPT won. It came up with the best article, the quickest, and I probably worked the most with ChatGPT, so I think it's also learning.
Knows you a little better.
Which is a little freaky, but so that was, a quick example. I was like, okay, it took the time of doing all the kind of researching and got me the quickest answer. Some other things though, I think all L&D professionals we struggle with some common challenges. There's the forgetting curve, right? People walk out of a training and then you ask them 20 minutes later, like,
Yeah.
do you remember how to do that 3-step process? We also, I think, typically with budgets, it's kind of, we tend to lean into like a one size fits all because it's hard to have bespoke for each different team member, that sort of challenge. The half-life of skills. As you see, wow, these skills, were expected, it used to be data literacy was so important, and now it's, how about designing prompts for AI? So being on top of those things is ongoing challenges where we're seeing AI can be helpful. So like I mentioned, we're launching a new LMS, Exonify. And Exonify does trainings, but then also does daily quizzes. So it can kind of be testing the individual, and also it asks the individual, what's your confidence level on your answer to this? So you're getting data back across a huge group of team members saying like, whoa, something is wrong. The training is not matching up because when we ask these questions 2 weeks later, they're not confident, or they're very confident in getting it wrong. Not great either. Yeah. But now we can better assess and review and kind of have that information. Can introduce new information as new skills become required, and it can also be personalized. So it's studying that individual, say, oh, you missed this question. We're gonna put it back into the rotation 3 days from now. So you're getting kind of more of that, addressing some of those ongoing challenges you have with training and talent development.
Yeah, fascinating. So obviously you mentioned before you have 8,000 employees all across the United States. So is there a way that you're able to make sure that these tools you're using and this culture you're trying to instill at the top gets down to the people in all of these different storage places all over the country? And how do you monitor that, and how do you make sure that that everything that you're trying to instill in your business is making it to the ground level?
Yeah, I think Extra Space is a really special place to work, and it has a unique culture. We're a storage company. We help store individuals' items. Usually it's at a point where they're very stressed. It's divorce, death, deployment. And it's a really unique business model. And so what I would say is, when I first came, I was like, what is it about this company that people want to work here for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Our leadership team has extremely long tenures. I think our exec team has like 100 years of experience across all of them at the company. And so I think helping to identify what is that secret sauce of what makes this company unique, because you have to identify that first before you want to figure out how are you cascading it down.
How do you instill that in everybody else? Yeah.
You're like, let's make sure we're knowing what we're doing. So I think my opinion in terms of what our secret sauce is, it's really win-win relationships. And this is starting from our foundation as a company. It's who we are today, and it's really what we think is going to be strategic in helping us get to where we want to be tomorrow. Ken Woolley is our founder and started the company in 1977. And last year, part of a leadership development, we did a recording of our 2 former CEOs, who are both still heavily involved in the company and on our board, and our current CEO. And to have 3 CEOs since 1977, there's something there as well, that consistency of leadership.
When you talk, can you give us an example of how you develop the win-win relationships? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, it really started, Ken Woolley, I will give you the short version of the story. But Ken Woolley, he started out with building storage units, and then he would sell them to public storage. And at a certain point, he hit his 40s, and he was like, I want to own a storage company. I don't want to be part of this supply chain. I actually want to own the business and really run the business. And it was around this time that he was on a project for public storage, and something went belly up. And public storage was out a lot of money, and a lot of the other business partners legally could walk away. And Ken Woolley could have also walked away and said, I'm not responsible for this. And instead he said, I'll pay you every dollar that I owe you. This is a man knowing that he wanted to become a competitor to this future business. Would have been an easy time to say, I'm gonna do what's best for me. I gotta go start this business. I wanna save this dollars. But instead he said, let's put together a payment plan. And he came back and made sure that he paid off every single dollar. Now, the benefit of that win-win relationship is still paying dividends today, because Ken has that reputation of, he knows that if you're going to go into business with Ken Woolley, he's never going to do a deal that's not a win-win with you. And that's been the reputation with Spencer Kirk, our second CEO, with Joe Margolis, our third CEO. And we even, most recently, we had an acquisition of a storage company in Texas. And I was talking to some of the team members involved in the project, and I was like, wow, this was a pretty big deal. How long did the project take? And they're like, 30 years this relationship has been building. And it's a relationship that Ken has had with his owner. And the owner said, I'm going to retire, and I'm not going to even talk to anybody else. Of course, it's going to be Extra Space I'm going to do this with. So that's really how the company started and really kind of been our secret sauce. So now we have to apply that to make sure that our team members know when you're working with your customer, it's got to be a win-win. So we have rate increases. That can be stressful for our team members, especially when they're kind of cash strapped or they're in a stressful situation. So we empower our team members to do rate adjustments. They are empowered to do that so that they can say, I know this customer, I can empathize, I see what's going on with them. This is not a good time for you to have a rate increase. Let me make that adjustment for you.
Right.
So having some of those tools in place, we also have to have that relationship with our team members, that they also see that, okay, when you come to work at Extra Space, we want to create win-win relationships between management and team members, with also our third-party owners that we manage their properties. It's really got to cascade throughout the whole organization.
But they still kind of focus on that original, sort of the original example, I guess, of the
that one,
foundation of the
it
company.
echoes through the halls. Yeah.
Terrific. All right. Well, we're about out of time. We're going to let you guys get to your cocktail hour a minute or two early, but thank you, Whitney, for doing this again. Give her a round of applause.
Thank you.